It is the morning of August 24th, 79 AD. The sun rises over the Bay of Naples as it has risen every morning for thousands of years. The water is calm and blue. The air is warm and sweet with the smell of bread baking and fish frying and wine being poured. The streets of Pompeii are already busy. Merchants opening their shops, children running through the narrow stone streets, slaves carrying water from the fountains, politicians arguing in the forum, gladiators training in the arena. It is a perfectly normal morning. It is the last morning. By this time tomorrow, every single person in this city who has not fled will be dead. The city itself will be buried under 20 feet of volcanic ash and rock, and it will stay buried for 1,700 years. Today we reconstruct those final 24 hours, minute by minute, street by street, using the archaeological evidence, the eyewitness accounts, and decades of modern scientific research that have revealed what happened in Pompeii on the last day of its life. Before we follow the final day, we need to understand what was lost. Pompeii in 79 AD was not a small village. It was a thriving, sophisticated, cosmopolitan Roman city of approximately 11,000 to 20,000 people. It had paved streets with raised sidewalks. It had a complex water distribution system fed by an aqueduct. It had public baths, theaters, an amphitheater that could hold 20,000 spectators, temples, brothels, bakeries, wine bars, and one of the most active commercial ports in the Roman Mediterranean. The streets of Pompeii were lined with shops, thermopolia, the Roman equivalent of fast food restaurants, where hot food was kept warm in clay pots set into stone counters. Archaeologists have found over 80 of them in Pompeii alone. The Romans ate out constantly. Most apartments had no kitchens. Street food was the norm. The walls of Pompeii were covered in graffiti. Thousands of inscriptions have been found, election endorsements, declarations of love, insults, advertisements, jokes, and poems. One wall near a bakery reads, Pyrrhus to his colleague Chius, I am sorry to hear you are dead, and I hope you are well. Another, whoever loves, let him flourish. Let him perish who knows not love. Let him perish twice over whoever forbids love. These are not the words of people living in fear of a volcano. These are the words of people going about their lives. People who had no idea what was coming. Vesuvius loomed over the city to the north. At 4,200 feet high, it was impossible to ignore. But in 79 AD, most Romans did not know it was a volcano. It had not erupted in recorded history. Its slopes were covered in vineyards producing some of the finest wine in Italy. It was a mountain, nothing more. There had been warnings. 17 years earlier, in 62 AD, a massive earthquake had damaged much of Pompeii. The city had been slowly rebuilding ever since. Scaffolding was still visible on several buildings when the eruption came. In the weeks before August 24th, there had been smaller earthquakes, and the local springs and wells had begun to run dry. But earthquakes were common in the region. The drying wells were noticed, but not understood. Nobody connected these signs to Vesuvius. Nobody knew what was coming. The morning, 6 a.m. to noon. The morning of August 24th begins normally. The city wakes early, as Roman cities always do. The streets are already busy by dawn. The thermopolia are serving breakfast, bread, olives, cheese, and wine diluted with water. The bakers have been working since midnight. The smell of fresh bread fills the streets around the forum. At the port, boats are being loaded and unloaded. Garum, the fermented fish sauce that Romans put on everything, is being packed into amphorae for shipping across the Mediterranean. Wine and olive oil from the fertile volcanic soil of the Campania region are being traded. In the Forum, the heart of the city, business is being conducted. Money is changing hands. Legal disputes are being argued. A political election is being organized. Election graffiti painted just days earlier is still fresh on the walls. In the amphitheater, gladiators are preparing for an upcoming games event. In the baths, the furnaces are being stoked for the day's visitors. In the brothels, business is already underway. It is, by every account, a completely normal morning in one of the most vibrant cities in the Roman world. And then, at some point in the late morning, the exact time is debated by scholars, but most evidence points to between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. Everything changes. The eruption begins, noon to 1 p.m. The first sign is a sound like nothing anyone in Pompeii has ever heard. A deep, resonant boom that seems to come from inside the earth itself. The ground shudders. Windows crack. Roof tiles slide. Birds stop singing. Dogs bark frantically and then go silent. And then people look north, toward Vesuvius. What they see is impossible to describe in terms that would have made sense to them. A column of material is rising from the summit of the mountain, rising and expanding as it goes. Within minutes, it is miles high. Within an hour, it will be over 20 miles high. The Roman writer Pliny the Younger, who watched the eruption from across the Bay of Naples, safely in the city of Misenum, described what he saw in 2 letters to the historian Tacitus. These letters are the only surviving eyewitness account of the eruption and are among the most important documents in the history of natural disaster. He described the column as resembling a pine tree, a trunk of solid material rising high into the sky before spreading outward at the top into branches of ash and debris. This shape is now known as a Plinian eruption column, named in his honor. It was rising at hundreds of miles per hour. The energy driving it was equivalent to hundreds of thousands of atomic bombs. In Pompeii, 6 miles from the summit, the reaction is immediate chaos. Some people run immediately. They grab whatever they can carry, money, jewelry, food, and head for the city gates. The roads out of the city fill rapidly with people on foot, on horseback, in carts. Others go inside. They tie pillows over their heads as protection from the debris already beginning to fall from the sky. They close shutters and doors. They wait, believing this will pass. And some simply stop in the street and stare, frozen by the sight of something so far outside their experience that their minds cannot process it as danger. The pumice fall, 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. For the next several hours, Pompeii is showered with pumice. Pumice is volcanic rock, solidified lava foam, filled with gas bubbles, light enough to float on water. The eruption column is throwing billions of tons of it into the stratosphere, and it is raining back down across the region. The pumice stones are the size of golf balls. They fall with enough force to injure and kill. They accumulate on rooftops and in streets at a rate of several inches per hour. By mid-afternoon, the streets of Pompeii are already ankle-deep in gray pumice. By evening, they are knee-deep. Roofs are beginning to collapse under the weight. This is the phase during which many people die inside buildings. The pumice accumulates on flat roofs. Roman roofs were not steeply pitched like modern roofs. The weight becomes catastrophic. Roofs collapse without warning, killing everyone inside. The sky has turned completely dark. Not the darkness of night, a thick, choking darkness of ash and debris that blocks the sun entirely. At 3 p.m. it is as dark as midnight. People are moving through the streets by torchlight. The torches barely penetrate the ash-thick air. They cannot see more than a few feet ahead. Pliny the Younger describes the darkness across the bay in Misenum as thicker and denser than any ordinary night. A darkness, he writes, not like a moonless night, but like being inside a sealed room with all lights extinguished. The evacuation of those who are going to survive is happening now. The people who recognized the danger early and moved fast are already miles from the city. The people still in Pompeii at this point, staying to protect their property, caring for the elderly or sick, simply unable to accept the reality of what is happening, are making decisions that will cost most of them their lives. The night, 8 p.m. to midnight, as darkness falls. Real darkness now, impossible to distinguish from the artificial darkness of the ash cloud. Pompeii becomes a scene of almost unimaginable chaos and terror. The pumice is now waist deep in the streets. Moving through the city requires enormous physical effort. Every step forward means pushing through deep, loose rock. The air is thick with sulfur and ash. Breathing is difficult and painful. People wrap cloth around their faces. Eyes burn in water. The constant sound of falling pumice is relentless, a sound witnesses described as like a heavy rain that never stops. Buildings are collapsing across the city. The sound of roofs giving way under the weight of accumulated pumice is a constant backdrop to the chaos. Screaming, running footsteps, the braying of terrified animals. Some people are still trying to leave, carrying children, helping elderly relatives, stumbling through the knee-deep pumice in total darkness with torches that barely function in the thick air. Others have retreated to the strongest rooms they can find. Cellars, vaulted rooms, the ground floors of stone buildings. They are waiting for the morning, believing that dawn will bring relief. They do not know what dawn will bring. In the harbor, boats are being loaded with people trying to flee by sea. The water in the bay is churning. The seismic activity associated with the eruption is generating waves that make navigation extremely difficult. Some boats make it out. Others are driven back by the waves and the debris falling from the sky. Pliny the Elder, the famous Roman naturalist and commander of the fleet at Misenum, an uncle of Pliny the Younger, has sailed toward Pompeii in an attempt to rescue people. He makes it to the town of Stabii, south of Pompeii. He cannot land due to the conditions at the beach. Debris and pumice have made the shoreline inaccessible. He stays the night at the house of a friend, apparently calm enough to sleep while his companions stay awake in terror. He will not survive the night. The pyroclastic surges, midnight to 6 a.m. This is where the eruption changes character, and where the possibility of survival ends for everyone still in Pompeii. At some point in the early morning hours, the exact timing is reconstructed from the stratigraphy of the ash deposits. The eruption column collapses. For hours, the column has been held up by the force of the eruption itself, the energy of the blast pushing the material upward. But eruption columns are unstable. When the energy driving them fluctuates, they collapse. And when a Plinian eruption column collapses, the material that was held kilometers in the air falls back down. It does not fall gently. It generates pyroclastic flows and surges, superheated avalanches of gas, ash, and rock moving at hundreds of miles per hour. The temperature inside a pyroclastic surge can reach 300 degrees Celsius or more. It moves faster than any living thing can run. It carries enough force to demolish stone buildings. The first pyroclastic surge reaches Herculaneum, the city on the coast directly below Vesuvius, around 1 a.m. Herculaneum is closer to the volcano than Pompeii. It is hit harder and faster. The surge kills everyone in the city virtually instantaneously. The heat is so extreme that it vaporizes soft tissue and carbonizes bone. Subsequent surges, each one slightly cooler than the last as they travel further from the source, head toward Pompeii. The first surge to reach Pompeii arrives at approximately 6 a.m. It is cooler by this point than the surges that hit Herculaneum, but it is still hot enough to kill every living thing it encounters. And it moves faster than any human can run. The final minutes. The people of Pompeii die in seconds. The evidence for this is in their bodies. The volcanic ash that settled over Pompeii preserved the exact positions of the people who died there. Over time, the bodies themselves decomposed, leaving hollow spaces in the hardened ash. When archaeologist Giuseppe Fiorelli developed the technique of pouring plaster into these cavities in the 1860s, the exact postures and expressions of the victims were revealed for the first time. What the casts show is devastating. A mother and child curled together. A group of gladiators in their barracks, some still chained. A man covering his face with his cloak. A dog, still chained to its post, twisted in its final agony. A young woman, face down, one arm extended as if reaching for something. An entire family in a cellar, the adults covering the children with their bodies. The positions tell a story of people who died suddenly and without warning in the middle of whatever they were doing. Some are clearly trying to flee. Some are clearly sheltering. Some appear to have been already unconscious, overcome by the gases that preceded the surge itself. The surge that kills them is hot enough to kill instantly. Death by heat stroke at this temperature is measured in seconds, not minutes. The people of Pompeii did not suffer long. They were there, and then they were not. The ash settles over the bodies. The city is buried. The sky, gradually, begins to clear, and Pompeii disappears from history for 1,700 years. The survivors. Not everyone died. The majority of Pompeii's population, estimates suggest somewhere between 60% and 80% of the city's inhabitants, escaped before the pyroclastic surges arrived. They are invisible in the archaeological record. The excavations tell us about the dead, not the living. But they existed. They fled down the roads south and east of the city. They took boats across the bay. They climbed into the hills away from Vesuvius. They survived, and then they had to live with what they had survived. Some survivors returned to the site of Pompeii in the days and weeks after the eruption. They dug through the ash to recover valuables, bodies of family members, sacred objects. The evidence for this looting, or recovery, depending on perspective, is visible in the archaeology. Tunnels dug through the ash reaching rooms that would have contained wealth. Statues removed from their bases. The most valuable items conspicuously absent from excavated sites. Other survivors never returned. They settled in other cities. They rebuilt their lives elsewhere. They carried the memory of August 24th, 79 AD with them for the rest of their lives. A memory of an ordinary morning that became the last morning of an entire world. Pliny the Younger survived. He wrote his account of the eruption years later, at the request of Tacitus. His letters are the reason we know as much as we do about those final hours. He was 17 years old when he watched the column rise over Vesuvius from across the bay. He lived to be over 60. He never forgot what he saw. The discovery. For 1,700 years, Pompeii was a memory, a story told by ancient writers, a name on old maps, a mystery. The site was accidentally rediscovered in 1599 when a canal was being dug through the area and workers encountered ancient walls and inscriptions. But the significance of the find was not recognized. The excavations were abandoned. Pompeii disappeared again. The formal rediscovery came in 1748 when the King of Naples, Charles III, ordered systematic excavations in the area. Workers began digging through the volcanic deposits and finding, astonishingly, a city, not ruins, a city, streets and buildings standing to several stories, frescoes still bright on the walls, food still in the cooking pots, objects arranged exactly as their owners had left them on the morning of August 24th. The excavations became a sensation across Europe. Artists, writers, intellectuals, and aristocrats came from across the continent to see this city from another world. The discovery of Pompeii was one of the catalysts for the neoclassical movement in European art and architecture. It changed European culture, but it also changed our understanding of the ancient world in ways that no amount of written history could have achieved. Written history tells us what powerful people chose to record, what they wanted remembered. Pompeii told us something different. Pompeii told us what an ordinary Roman city was actually like to live in, what the food was, what the jokes were, what was written on the walls, what people kept in their houses, what they wore, what they looked like in their last moments. No other archaeological site in the world has given us this kind of intimacy with the ancient past. Pompeii is not just a ruin. It is a snapshot, a photograph taken by a volcano and preserved for 1,700 years. What Pompeii tells us. The excavations of Pompeii have been ongoing for nearly 300 years, and they are still revealing new things. Modern technology has transformed what we can learn from the site. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed structures that have not yet been excavated. CT scanning of the plaster casts has revealed bone structure, dental health, and even the remains of food in the stomachs of victims. DNA analysis is revealing the genetic relationships between victims found together and their origins across the Roman Empire. Multispectral imaging is revealing text in carbonized scrolls that would otherwise be forever unreadable. The Herculaneum scrolls, carbonized papyrus scrolls buried in the eruption and recovered from a villa outside the city, are being read for the first time using AI and imaging technology that can detect ink beneath layers of carbon without unrolling the fragile scrolls. These are texts that have not been read in 2,000 years. They may contain lost works of ancient philosophy and literature. In 2021, an almost perfectly preserved snack bar was excavated in Pompeii. A thermopolium with its stone counter, its clay pots still containing the remains of the last meal ever served there, and paintings of the food on offer decorating the walls. Biological analysis of the food remains identified fragments of duck, pig, goat, fish, and snails. A Roman fast food menu frozen in time. In 2023, the skeletal remains of two men were found in a previously unexcavated area of the city. One was clearly a man of means, based on the quality of his clothing and the evidence of a well-fed life. The other showed signs of years of hard physical labor and healed fractures consistent with a life of heavy work. They died together in the same room, master and slave, equal in death in a way they were certainly not equal in life. Every excavation tells a human story. Every story reminds us that the people of Pompeii were not historical figures. They were people, with jobs and families and favorite foods and bad days and good days and ordinary mornings that they expected to turn into ordinary afternoons. Vesuvius today. Vesuvius is still active. It last erupted in 1944 within living memory. The eruption was relatively small but destroyed several villages on its slopes and killed 26 people. Today, Approximately 3 million people live in the shadow of Vesuvius in the Naples metropolitan area. This is considered by volcanologists to be one of the most dangerous volcanic situations in the world. Not because an eruption is necessarily imminent, but because of the scale of the evacuation challenge if one does occur. The Italian government has a detailed evacuation plan for the region. It designates a red zone directly around the volcano, approximately 700,000 people, who would need to evacuate within 72 hours of a warning being issued. There is a yellow zone beyond that, approximately 800,000 more people, who would follow. The plan exists. Whether it could be executed in the real world, with the traffic, the panic, and the inevitable refusal of some people to leave, is a question that keeps emergency planners awake at night. Because Vesuvius does not give much warning. Unlike Yellowstone, which shows decades of precursory activity before a major eruption, Vesuvius has historically erupted with relatively short warning periods. Days, sometimes hours. The people of Pompeii had perhaps 6 to 12 hours between the beginning of the eruption and the arrival of the pyroclastic surges that killed everyone who remained. Modern monitoring is better than anything available in 79 AD. But the fundamental challenge, moving millions of people away from a volcano in hours, remains the same. On the morning of August 24th, 79 AD, a woman in Pompeii woke up and made breakfast. She did not know it was the last breakfast she would ever make. A baker pulled fresh bread from his oven and arranged it in his shop window. He did not know those loaves would still be there 1,700 years later, carbonized but recognizable, sitting in the exact place he left them. A child ran through the narrow streets toward the Forum, past the fountains and the painted walls, past the thermopolia with their hot food and the wine bars with their painted signs. She did not know she was running through a city that would become the most famous archaeological site in the world. A man sat in a garden and looked up at Vesuvius rising against the morning sky. Perhaps he noted the thin wisp of smoke at the summit. Unusual, but not alarming. He went back to his wine. They were living their lives. Fully, completely, without reservation. The way people live when they do not know the world is about to end. And then it ended. The ash that buried Pompeii also preserved it. The catastrophe that killed its people also immortalized them. The eruption that destroyed a city also froze it in a single moment, and held that moment intact for nearly 2,000 years, waiting for us to find it and understand what it meant. What it means is this: every ordinary morning is precious. Every ordinary life contains extraordinary humanity. Every city, every street, every meal, every conversation, every piece of graffiti scratched on a wall by someone who wanted to leave a mark, all of it matters. All of it is worth preserving. All of it tells the story of what it means to be alive. Pompeii tells that story better than any book ever written. Because it is not a story. It is a morning, frozen, real, and waiting to be remembered.